The obsidian crown drifted in silence above the edge of a pale blue nebula, its hull gleaming like polished obsidian glass. Inside its command spire, Admiral Sareth Khan stood before a sweeping viewport, claws resting on the railing, his yellow eyes fixed on the glittering void ahead. Below the newly conquered world of Haven, 12 smoldered, a once green colony, now a scarred wasteland of molten cities. He should have felt triumph. The Dominion's banners burned in orbit, and the fleet's war horns had sounded victory. Yet there was no exhilaration, only a faint irritation that the humans had not made it more entertaining. "Pathetic," he murmured, voice low, disdain curling each syllable. Commander Reth, young and eager to please, approached with a crisp salute. "The colony is neutralized, Admiral. Resistance minimal. Estimated survivors, negligible." Sareth turned his gaze slightly, his expression unreadable. "Minimal resistance?" "Yes, sir. Most fled before our arrival. Their settlements were already empty." The Admiral's ridged brow furrowed. "Empty?" Reth hesitated, recalibrating his tone. "Our scanners show traces of mass evacuation. Transport signatures, old, maybe a cycle ago." Sareth's tail flicked once, a gesture of annoyance. "Then we were too slow." He turned away, eyes narrowing as he stared at the empty orbital lanes. The humans had always been strange, soft-skinned bipeds with inefficient weapons and fragile bodies, yet they clung to survival with irrational persistence. The Dominion's War Council called them transients of the dust, a species destined to vanish once true civilization arrived. Sareth had believed that once. He wasn't entirely sure he still did. "Order the fleet forward," he said finally. "If they've abandoned this world, then we'll chase them to their nest. Every trace of their kind will be reduced to plasma." "Yes, Admiral," Reth replied, though the younger officer's eyes flickered with unease before he turned away. The bridge came alive in motion, tactical holograms flaring, crew at their stations. Beyond the viewport, warships aligned in perfect formation, engines burning like tiny suns. They advanced deeper into human space, the fleet an iron tide pushing toward the unknown. As the minutes passed, the command deck fell into its steady rhythm, quiet efficiency laced with arrogance. Officers shared confident murmurs about spoils and promotions. They joked about harvesting human data for entertainment, about who would claim the first Terran prisoner. The laughter was smooth, practiced, a shield against boredom. Then, amid the chatter, the calm officer frowned. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission." Sareth turned, irritation flashing. "From where?" "Unknown source. Narrowband frequency. Human code, but ancient, centuries old." "Put it through." A burst of static filled the room, followed by a faint, broken voice, human, low and calm, almost conversational. "You shouldn't have come here." The bridge went silent. No one moved. The words lingered like smoke in the air, eerily devoid of emotion. Sareth's lip curled. "Trace it." The officer's hands flew across the console. Attempting. "There's nothing, sir. No origin, no signal decay. It's as if it's everywhere," Reth whispered. The lights flickered once briefly. A soft hum vibrated through the hull, then faded. Sareth's gaze drifted toward the endless black. "Ignore it. Psychological bait. Humans excel at desperation." He forced composure into his tone, but something in that voice clung to him. It hadn't sounded desperate. It had sounded certain. The fleet pressed onward. The ships slipped through quiet sectors of space where human colonies should have been, but weren't. One after another, they found empty stations, evacuated planets, orbital debris left purposefully behind. No battle, no chaos, just absence, as if humanity had quietly stepped away before the war began. When the obsidian crown reached the edge of another uncharted system, Sareth leaned forward. "Long-range scans." "Scanners detecting faint electromagnetic traces," Reth reported. "Old communications buoys. Still transmitting, though minimal power." Sareth exhaled sharply. "Bring one aboard." Moments later, the corroded beacon floated in the hangar, human markings scorched but legible. Engineers crowded around, working quickly. The device powered on with a soft click and began to broadcast. The Admiral and his officers watched as a holographic image materialized, a human child, perhaps 6 years old, sitting beside a campfire under a strange sky. Her eyes looked straight into the recorder. "If you're seeing this," the recording said softly, "you found what we left behind. We moved on. We always do." The message looped once, then died. Reth's voice broke the silence. "Admiral, are we sure they're running?" Saratha's tail lashed the floor, his patience unraveling. "They're prey, Commander. Prey runs. Predators follow. That's the order of things." But deep down, a fragment of unease lodged itself beneath the certainty. As the fleet advanced, the stars around them began to thin. Navigation beacons failed to respond. Their maps grew unreliable. Communications flickered, then degraded. Ships began reporting malfunctions, systems glitching, instruments misreading coordinates. Sareth stood rigid before the main viewport, the faint light of distant stars reflecting across his scales. "Status of our vanguard." Reth hesitated. "They entered the next sector an hour ago, sir. We've lost contact." Lost. No distress signals. Just gone. The bridge grew still again. Somewhere deep in the ship's hull, a vibration trembled, like the echo of distant thunder. Sareth stared into the void, and for the first time in his long career, felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, something close to doubt. He masked it behind authority. "Prepare all ships for continued advance. If the humans have defenses, we'll crush them. If they have fled, we'll claim what they left." The command crew responded, voices snapping in unison. Engines flared to life once more. But the laughter was gone now, replaced by the brittle silence of professionals unwilling to name their unease. As the obsidian crown entered the next sector, sensors blinked erratically. For a heartbeat, a faint distortion shimmered ahead, like heat rising from invisible fires. Then it was gone. Reth whispered, "Admiral, I don't think they're running." Sareth didn't answer. His gaze remained locked on the darkness where the stars had disappeared. Behind him, the ship's lights dimmed once more, and somewhere beyond the hull, something vast moved, silent, unseen, waiting. And still, he ordered the fleet forward. The fleet reached the Sol system 3 standard days later, battered by interference and silence. Sensors mapped the scattered wrecks of forgotten satellites orbiting a dull yellow star. There was no resistance, no transmissions, just the whisper of cosmic dust across the hull. Admiral Sareth Khan stood motionless at the command deck, the void of space reflecting in his eyes. What should have been the heart of humanity looked like an abandoned tomb. Commander Reth adjusted the scanners, his voice thin. "All planets appear lifeless, Admiral. Earth is desolate. No power signatures. Nothing but static." Saratha's tongue flicked across sharp teeth in irritation. "They hide well, I'll grant them that. Keep scanning. Somewhere in this system, they must have something left to burn." The younger officer hesitated, glancing toward the viewport. "Sir, may I speak freely?" "You always do." "This doesn't feel like victory. It feels like an invitation." Sareth turned his head slightly, studying him. Reth's scales gleamed under the dim bridge lights, youthful, unscarred, still ruled by emotion. "You mistake emptiness for strategy. They're finished. The humans have fled or starved. Nothing more." Reth didn't reply, but his hands clenched behind his back. He'd seen too many empty worlds, each one stripped clean with surgical precision, as if humanity had erased itself deliberately. No panic, no chaos, just absence. Then the navigation officer spoke, her tone unsteady. "Admiral, I'm detecting residual emissions from behind the third planet. A large object, metallic, stationary." "On screen," Sareth ordered. The holographic display shimmered to life, revealing the pale curve of a planet, blue and green, fragile, and beyond it, the faint outline of something immense drifting behind its moon. Reth's voice dropped to a whisper. "That's not debris." Saratha's claws tapped the console. "Magnify." The image sharpened, a structure the size of a small moon, its surface dark, geometric, partially cloaked in shadow. It emitted no energy signature, no beacon. Yet every instinct in Saratha's battle-hardened frame screamed that was not dead. "Approach with caution," he ordered. As the fleet drew closer, the silence deepened. No defenses activated. No signals. The alien ships glided toward the structure, unaware that thousands of invisible eyes were already watching. Inside the command deck, tension pressed like gravity. Then, without warning, every console on the obsidian crown flickered, once twice, and stabilized. Reth turned. "We're being scanned." "By what?" Before he could answer, a human voice filled the bridge. Calm, cold, absolutely in control. "Admiral Sareth Khan, of the Varkal Dominion. You've come far." The sound froze everyone in place. It wasn't static. It was direct transmission, encrypted on their own military channel. Saratha's voice sharpened. Identify yourself. You wouldn't know the name. We don't announce ourselves anymore. The voice was steady, devoid of malice, almost bored. Then came a faint hum, and the moon ahead of them began to shift, massive panels sliding open, revealing arrays of light beneath. It wasn't a station. It was a fortress. The command deck erupted in motion, energy readings spiking. Unknown weapon systems activating. Shields. Sarath barked, evasive pattern delta. Return fire. The fleet scattered as lances of pure kinetic energy tore through the void, silent, invisible until impact. Ships vanished without flame, compressed into debris in microseconds. Reth's voice cracked. They hit us before the sensors registered the launch. The obsidian crown shuddered, alarms screaming. Sarath gripped the railing, watching one of his cruisers split in two, drifting apart like a broken ornament. His mind raced, not with fear but disbelief. This wasn't random chaos. Every shot was deliberate, targeted, timed. He forced composure into his tone. Regroup the fleet. Focus fire on that installation. Overwhelm it. Plasma beams lit the void, glorious, feudal streaks of color. The human fortress absorbed or evaded them, its surface shifting in ways that defied known physics. Then, one by one, the attacking ships blinked off the sensors, erased without visible impact. You shouldn't have come here, the voice repeated, calm and faintly regretful. Sarath slammed his claw against the console. Cowards hiding behind machines. Machines don't hide, Admiral. They remember. The signal cut. Silence fell again, punctuated only by the dying groan of the ship's structure. The remaining fleet had scattered, half destroyed, half blind. Sarath stared at the display. Of 300 ships, fewer than 80 remained operational. The rest drifted as debris or burned in the shadow of the human stronghold. Reth turned, his voice hollow. Admiral, that wasn't a random trap. They waited for us. They let us come this far. Sarath didn't answer immediately. His gaze lingered on the empty starfield, the shifting ruins of his fleet. He recalled the empty colonies, the erased trails, the child's recorded message. We moved on. We always do. He straightened his posture. Prepare for retreat. Reth blinked. Retreat. Temporarily, Sarath said evenly. We regroup, we analyze, and then we return. No prey escapes the Dominion. But his voice lacked conviction, and Reth knew it. The air on the bridge felt heavier, charged with a quiet awareness that something had changed. The humans were not prey. They were predators who had learned patience. As the surviving ships limped away from Earth's orbit, the sensors caught faint glimmers behind the moon, smaller vessels decloaking briefly before vanishing again. They didn't pursue. They simply watched. Reth stood beside the Admiral in silence, both staring at the fading blue sphere on the display. They were waiting, Reth said finally. All along. Sarath's expression hardened. Then they've shown their hand, and we'll learn how to break it. Yet the words rang hollow, a mask over something cold creeping beneath his confidence. As the fleet turned toward deep space, a final transmission slipped through the static, untraceable, faint as breath. You entered our space, thinking we were weak. You've mistaken silence for surrender. The transmission ended. The obsidian crown's engines flared, streaking away from the dying light of the Sol system. Sarath remained by the viewport long after the stars returned to view. Behind his reflection, explosions still bloomed in memory, bright, precise, and merciless. He had faced rebellions, purged worlds, survived a dozen wars. Yet never had he encountered an enemy who fought without hatred, without fear, without noise. They waited, he murmured to himself, voice almost reverent. They planned for this. Reth turned, studying him. Sir. Sarath didn't look away from the dark. They wanted us to find them. They wanted to see how far we'd go. He finally tore his gaze from the viewport, eyes dim but burning with realization. We didn't invade them, Commander. We stepped into something built to close behind us. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly ahead, vast and indifferent. Somewhere behind them, in the ruins of Sol, the humans watched their retreat in silence, calculating, waiting for the next move. The war had only just begun, but for the first time, Sarath felt the faint, unmistakable taste of fear. The Dominion's capital world glowed beneath a fractured sky when the message arrived. A single encrypted burst from the frontier, cut short halfway through Admiral Sareth Khan's voice. The council chambers trembled with argument as the transmission ended, some claiming mechanical error, others whispering the unthinkable, defeat. Far from their marble halls, aboard the wounded Obsidian Crown, Sareth stared at the static-filled remnants of his fleet's logs. His claws trembled once before he steadied them on the console. Around him, the bridge had grown dim, the air heavy with burned circuitry. Of 300 ships, 78 had limped home. The rest were ashes scattered through human space. Commander Reth stood beside him, younger eyes hardened by what they'd witnessed. "The council won't believe this," he said. "They'll say we exaggerated, that it was an ambush, bad luck, anything but what it was." Sareth's tone was low, dangerous. "They can believe what they wish. I saw their machines. I saw their precision. The humans didn't improvise, Reth. They executed a plan decades in the making." Reth studied him quietly. The Admiral's composure was intact, but the subtle shift in his voice betrayed something new, respect mingled with fear. "Why do you think they let us go?" he asked. Sareth turned toward the viewport, where the Dominion's twin suns burned bright and distant. "Because they wanted witnesses." He remembered the last image before retreat, the silent human ships hovering behind the moon, unmoving, watching. It hadn't been a pursuit. It had been a warning. When they finally reported to the Dominion Council, the chamber was filled with light and disbelief. Rows of dignitaries shimmered in gold-threaded robes, their expressions shifting between curiosity and disdain. High Chancellor Varys leaned forward, her voice clipped. "You claim a primitive species annihilated a fleet of the Dominion's finest? With what? Scrap metal and courage?" Sareth met her gaze, unflinching. "With intelligence, with patience, and with weapons that surpass anything we've fielded." Laughter rippled across the hall, brittle and sharp. One counselor sneered, "Do you expect us to believe that the hairless bipeds of a dying rock have outmatched our empire?" "They didn't outmatch us," Sareth said softly. "They outthought us." Silence followed. The counselor's smirk faltered. Reth stepped forward, holding a recovered data shard. "Our scans detected materials that distort mass and energy readings. They cloaked entire installations behind gravitational interference. They knew our sensors better than we did." Varys's voice hardened. "And yet you survived. Explain that." Sareth's jaw tensed. "Because they wanted us too. Every destroyed ship was a message. They could have erased us all. They didn't." A low murmur filled the chamber, fear disguised as skepticism. The Chancellor leaned back in her throne. "You suggest restraint. Compassion, perhaps?" Sareth's eyes narrowed. "No. Calculation." After the meeting, he walked alone through the palace corridors, the weight of humiliation pressing into his shoulders. The air smelled of polished stone and arrogance. He paused before a large viewport overlooking the capital skyline, beautiful, ordered, fragile. "They will not listen," Reth said quietly, stepping beside him. "They never do," Sareth murmured. "They've forgotten what true war looks like. They think conquest is parades and numbers. The humans they remember cost." Reth looked at him carefully. "Do you?" The question lingered, sharp and uncomfortable. Sareth didn't answer. Days passed. The council prepared another fleet, larger, louder, and just as blind. Sareth wasn't invited to command it. His reports were buried under layers of bureaucracy and pride. He returned to his ship, confined to orbit, where he studied the fragments of human transmissions his scouts had intercepted. Old recordings, voices reading poetry, speeches about survival, the sound of rain over ruined cities. Every piece carried something the Dominion had long forgotten: grief, endurance, and memory. Reth entered quietly, watching his admiral play an ancient Terran clip on the main display. A soldier's voice, hoarse but steady, echoed through the bridge. "When the enemy believes you weak, let them come closer. Then remind them why you endured." Sareth paused the playback. "They were preparing for us long before we knew they existed." Reth hesitated, then asked, "You admire them?" Sareth's eyes flicked toward him. "I fear them." That admission hung between them, heavier than any command. Later, reports arrived from a second fleet, contact lost within days of crossing into human space. No distress signals, no wreckage, just disappearance. The Council dismissed it as a navigational failure, a spatial anomaly. Sareth knew better. The pattern was too precise, too deliberate. "They're not fighting a war," he told Reth. "They're erasing it." Night on the Dominion capital brought uneasy quiet. The stars outside the viewport seemed fewer now, as if shrinking from what lay beyond. Sareth found himself awake, unable to rest, watching old tactical footage of the humans' counterstrike. He slowed the playback, observing their formation patterns, the perfect timing, the economy of movement. There was no triumph in their destruction, no chaos. Only resolve. He remembered the human voice that had spoken to him during the battle, flat, calm, utterly certain. "We don't announce ourselves anymore." Those words haunted him more than the explosions. Reth approached, weary but alert. What happens when the council realizes they've already lost? Sareth's tail flicked once, a restrained gesture of thought. They won't realize. Not until human ships appear in orbit above this world, and by then it will be too late. Reth looked at him steadily. "Then what do we do?" The admiral's gaze lingered on the distant suns. "We learn. We adapt. Or we vanish like the rest." For the first time, the confidence that had defined Sareth since his rise through the Dominion ranks was gone, replaced by quiet gravity. The enemy he had mocked had become a mirror, one that reflected everything the Dominion had forgotten about survival. A faint transmission pulsed through the comms array, half-broken and low in frequency. Not human this time, but one of their own fleets calling for help, cut off mid-sentence. Reth moved to respond, but Sareth stopped him. "No," he said softly. "Don't answer. If they've reached that point, no message can save them." He turned from the console, the glow of distant firestorms reflected in his eyes. "It's begun. The power's shifting." Reth felt it too, a slow, inevitable turning of the tide. The Dominion was still vast, but its heart had started to hollow. Somewhere beyond the frontier, humanity was advancing, silently, methodically, and without mercy. Sareth's voice was barely a whisper now, a confession more than a command. They don't roar when they win. They whisper, and the stars obey. Outside, in the infinite dark, the constellations seemed to flicker, as though the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for humanity's next move. The Dominion's final armada assembled above its capital world like a wounded beast, massive yet trembling. Dozens of fleets orbited in tense formation, weapons primed, engines burning through their last reserves. The sky glowed crimson from orbital shields, while cities below whispered rumors of human vengeance approaching through the dark. Every frequency hummed with panic, disguised as preparation. Admiral Sareth Khan stood at the bridge of the Obsidian Crown, his reflection fractured across the viewport glass. The Dominion's banners shimmered on his uniform, a hollow echo of glory. He had warned them this day would come, but the Council had called him paranoid, broken, unfit for command. Now they sent him back to the front, not as a hero, but as a scapegoat to die proving them right. "Enemy signatures detected," said Commander Reth, his voice low but steady. "Hundreds, no, thousands. They're emerging from nothing, space folds, gravitational seams, every direction at once." Sareth didn't ask for confirmation. He simply watched. The void itself seemed to ripple as blackland silhouettes unfolded from hidden gateways, human ships materializing in silence. Their hulls were unadorned, utilitarian, built for purpose rather than spectacle. The Dominion's war machines looked ornate beside them, bright, fragile things. Across the communication array, a Dominion officer's voice cracked. "They're not sending signals, Admiral. No warnings, no demands. Just silence." Sareth closed his eyes briefly. "That is their demand." Then the attack began. The stars vanished under the first barrage. It wasn't fire or radiation, but kinetic annihilation, precision strikes that folded destroyers in half before they could even register damage. Human fleets moved like clockwork, vanishing and reappearing across impossible distances. Their tactics were not conquest, they were extermination of resistance. The Obsidian Crown shook violently as explosions rippled through nearby ships. "Return fire." Reth shouted, though his voice betrayed futility. The Dominion's energy lances streaked toward invisible targets, hitting only the cold emptiness of space. Sareth's claws dug into the railing. "Stop wasting energy," he ordered sharply. "Pattern analysis. Find where they'll strike next." "They don't strike twice, sir. They move before we can predict. Then we learn faster." He refused to surrender to chaos, even as the battle dissolved into fragments. One Dominion dreadnought tried to ram a human cruiser. It disintegrated before making contact. The humans didn't gloat. They didn't answer distress calls. They simply advanced. From orbit, the capital's surface lit up as human drones pierced the atmosphere, each the size of a man, each precise as thought. The planetary defense grid collapsed in silence. "Admiral," Reth said, his voice tight, "we're losing the planet." Sareth didn't flinch. "We lost it the moment they arrived." A burst of light illuminated the command deck, the Council's own citadel on the surface consumed in a single, surgical strike. The explosion bloomed like a dying sun. Every Dominion channel went dead. For a long moment nothing moved. Then a new transmission filled the bridge, clear and calm, the same voice Sareth had heard near Sol, still emotionless, still controlled. "Admiral Sareth Khan, your Empire's defenses have been neutralized. The war is over." The crew froze. Reth turned to his commander, eyes wide. "Do we respond?" Sareth hesitated. The weight of every battle, every death, every ignored warning bore down on him. He straightened slowly. "Open channel." His voice, when it came, was measured but raw. "This is Admiral Khan of the Dominion. If this is victory, then claim it. But tell me, why? Why not finish us?" A brief pause followed, then the human voice replied. "We don't finish. We adapt. As you did once." The transmission flickered, revealing the image of a human admiral. The man's face was calm, marked by weariness rather than rage. Behind him, a holographic display showed the Dominion capital engulfed in containment fields rather than flames. "You called us savages," the human said quietly. "You weren't wrong. We learned savagery from centuries of surviving ourselves. But this isn't vengeance. It's control." Sareth's throat tightened. "Control," he repeated bitterly. "You would replace one empire with another." "No," the human replied. "We replace arrogance with awareness. The galaxy has been your cage. Now it's ours to open or close." The connection ended, leaving the bridge in silence once more. Reth turned, his voice unsteady. "They're offering surrender. Conditional occupation. They want you to lead the transition." Sareth stared at him, stunned. "They would have me serve. Perhaps they think you're the only one who understands them now." The words lingered, heavy with truth. Sareth moved to the viewport. Below, the Dominion's shining capital was blanketed by drifting clouds of ash and starlight. Human ships formed a perimeter in perfect stillness, engines dimmed. No celebration, no sound. Victory without joy. He thought of the human's final message near Sol. "You've mistaken silence for surrender." He understood it now. Silence wasn't submission, it was confidence. "Commander," he said quietly, "prepare transmission to the fleet. Cease hostilities. Tell them the Dominion yields." Reth nodded slowly, then hesitated. "And you, Admiral? What will you do?" Sareth's gaze remained on the horizon, where human ships hung, like judgment itself. "I'll do what they expect," he said. "Survive." The transmission was sent. Across the system, scattered Dominion remnants powered down weapons and drifted into compliance. The war that had begun in arrogance ended in resignation. Minutes later, a small human vessel detached from the perimeter and approached the Obsidian Crown. No escorts, no weapons charged. The gesture was clear: trust or the illusion of it. Sareth turned to Reth. "I'll meet them alone." Reth hesitated but obeyed. The airlock hissed open, and the Admiral stepped into the docking corridor. At the far end stood a single human figure, tall, uniform black, eyes steady. No words were exchanged for a long moment. Then the human extended a hand. "Admiral Khan," he said, "welcome to the new order." Sareth looked at the offered hand, then slowly took it. The contact was brief but electric, a moment where history turned. "You've won," Sareth said. The human's expression didn't change. "No one wins. We just endure better." When the human departed, the Admiral returned to his bridge. Reth waited silently. Outside, the last of the Dominion's banners flickered and died, replaced by the quiet pulse of human beacons. Sareth's reflection met his gaze in the darkened glass, older, stripped of pride, yet alive. "We thought conquest was victory," he murmured. "But survival was always theirs." Reth looked toward the stars, where the human fleet now spread in all directions. "What happens now?" Sareth watched as the first human wormholes ignited, gates opening toward uncharted sectors. "Now," he said softly, "they cross into ours." The obsidian crown drifted in silence, half-shadowed, half-lit. Around it, the galaxy seemed to exhale a long, inevitable surrender. And somewhere beyond the borders of the known, a voice whispered across the dark, calm and final. They crossed into human space and realized why no ship ever came back.